Will your audience get bored if you repurpose your content on all the platforms? Jana, welcome to 2024.
Woo!
Happy
2024.
Happy New Year to my work wife. And
Happy New Year.
I'm so happy to see you. This is the topic we're
Yeah.
chatting about today. So why don't we just riff on it for a little while?
Sounds good. Sounds great. Yeah, I get this question all the time. Like, it's like one of those root questions where people ask questions like, oh, how often should I say the same thing? Or, how often can I reuse the topic or whatnot? Inside like high leverage content, I teach a lot about repurposing. But the root of the question is often a mindset question, which is, are people going to get bored? Is my audience going to go like, oh, she already said that, I'm going to unfollow her? Or, are they going to make a mental note like, don't buy that because she just repeated herself 3 times in the last month with the same message. And even though that sounds silly when I say it out loud right now, a lot of people, it's easy to think that. Like I've had those same thoughts, even though we know as we're saying it out loud that, nah, that's not how it happens. It's not how we behave. But it's still something that creeps into our thought processes sometimes. I'm sure you still feel it too sometimes, right?
I do. And even as a consumer, sometimes I feel that way, but then I have to remind myself that the content I'm consuming, I'm not their ideal audience. So of course it's going to annoy me, but their ideal audience is going to be thinking like, oh my gosh, thanks for the reminder, because I know that's what my
Yeah.
audience tells me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one. And actually, I've been thinking about that a lot recently in the context of threads.
Mm,
Because on threads, I'm really enjoying being over there right now.
me too.
And I'm very active there. Yeah, I know you're really active there too, and we're both really enjoying it. And I think that the people who I'm interacting with a lot are great, but they're not always my ideal audience. Like I think there's a lot, it's wonderful. I feel like I'm connecting with a lot of other people who are at my level, which is pretty
Yeah.
cool. And having a lot of really meaningful conversations with people who are kind of like our peers, like not
Yeah.
necessarily just Pinterest people, but just other marketing people and people who are already a little advanced in their business. And I always have to remember that like they're not really the ones that I'm wanting to, I don't want to like listen too much, to their thoughts on things and let their thoughts inform my content creation too much because they're not really my ideal audience. So it's interesting you say that.
Actually, you bring up a really good point. I was just on Threads this morning, and I can't remember who I'm following that I saw this from, but they literally copied and pasted because I saw it before, the same exact thread from like 8 weeks ago, and posted it again today.
Mhm.
And I just kept scrolling. Like that does me no, it costs me nothing.
Yeah, 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 it's fine. I
So
think that, yeah, I think that for me, actually, and this is like one of the things I wanted to talk about actually, is when I see someone posting the same thing, whether it's the exact same thing, although it would be very hard for anyone to detect that it's literally a copy and paste of something you posted 8 weeks ago. But if you do that, which is fine, you can totally do
mhm.
that. Or if you reword it a little bit or take it from a slightly different angle, but basically you're sharing the exact same thing. When I see people doing that, for me personally, it's actually very psychologically comforting to me. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but I'll bet there's a lot of people who hear this, whether we have people live with us now or on the replay later, and think, oh my God, you're right, me too. When I see people do that, it actually makes me trust them more when they repeat themselves. And I think to myself, like, oh, like I knew she was going to say that. Like I knew that was going to be her answer. Or I love her take on that. So I love when she says that over again because I really like that take. And it reminds me that her take is the one that I buy into. So for me, it's actually very psychologically comforting and builds trust with people when they repeat their messages over and over again. I don't get bored. I like that, but I don't
I
know. What
think
do you
you
think?
bring up a really good point, and um, we have to remember that our audiences are receiving thousands of messages every single day.
Yeah.
Emails, DMs, just scrolling through feeds. There's thousands of marketing messages that we're all consuming. So chances are, if you're repeating something again, like this guy I saw today, posting something from about 8 weeks ago, like you said, I don't hate it. And it also reminded me of something that I had bookmarked in the back of my mind to think about. And I think that helps our audiences to stay on track with the goals of the thing that they wanted to do in the first place. So for me, if
Right.
my audience is really wanting to stay on track for their Pinterest marketing strategies for 2024, and I tell them they should be creating, these 3 types of pins, and they're only creating one of those 3 because they forgot about the other 2, because they forgot about that video, because they've been watching 4 other Pinterest people's videos. It just kind of brings it back to the surface.
Exactly. Exactly. It reinforces those key messages that we really do want to get across to our audiences. That's another reason too. Yeah. And I think coming back to what you said a few minutes ago about whether you're the ideal audience or not, when you saw that person who reposted something he posted 8 weeks ago, one of the operative words there for me right now is he. And the
Yeah.
reason for that is because I know that you follow a lot of female entrepreneurs. And so I kind of want to say too, like, do people notice that you posted the same thing that you posted 8 weeks ago? And that question, the answer to that question, even just do they even notice it, is nuanced. One of the reasons we might notice it, one of the reasons I might notice it, is because the first time I saw it, it annoyed me.
Mhm.
And now again, and I'm not saying that this message annoyed you, but if you see it 8 weeks later again and it annoyed you, like if we shift into thinking from that creator's perspective, like either it annoyed me, but it reminded me and brought that person back to the top of my mind, or it might just be that I'm not the ideal person, the ideal customer for that
Yeah.
person. You know what I mean? So, and I say this is kind of complex, but what I'm trying to get back to is that if I say things and people really resonate with them, I think it's actually less likely that they're going to notice that I said it again than if it was something that I said that actually annoyed them the first time around.
Mhm.
So the people who are my ideal audience, A, aren't likely to notice when I repeat things. And B, when they
Yeah.
do notice, they notice because, like you said, they like that the message is being reinforced and they're being reminded, or it's psychologically comforting to them. And they're like, oh, I love when she says that. I love her take on that. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a really good point of why I noticed that it was the same one. And because I do mostly follow women, and in this case, I've been following more men on threads lately, because I'm finding more like heart-centered, kind of like us men over there. And I think it's just the crowd
Yeah.
that's being drawn into threads in general. The reason I noticed it was the same content is because I liked it and interacted with it before, and it was a man, because that is very rare in my, echo chamber.
Yeah.
That's why I
Yeah.
noticed. So anyways, not that
Yeah.
that matters at all, but
Well, no, I'm glad you mentioned that because I wasn't sure if that's what was going on when you described that or if there was a different scenario because I know like there's one really big creator who posted something on Threads recently and then reposted it like 4 weeks later, I think. And there was an uproar about it. Everyone was like, this was terrible the first time and it's even worse the second time and the person's just repeating it and whatever. But again, all those people were like, I don't know. There's a lot
annoyed.
going on there, right? Because all those people probably weren't going to buy from that person anyway who were like annoyed by it. And then also all those people were just amplifying that person's post
Right.
for the people who are not annoyed by it and agree with it and are going to buy from that person. So it's like, it's all good. It's all good.
All press is good press.
Right. And all repetition is good repetition, really, truly. I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen a creator, one that I liked or one that I didn't, who I felt was honestly, truly repeating themselves too frequently.
Yeah. I don't think we do it enough.
Yeah, exactly. If anything, we absolutely err on the side
And
of not
and
doing it enough.
okay, I want to own up to this, okay? I want to work on messaging. I actually worked with a messaging coach back in 2020, and that person actually taught me a really valuable skill for how to sell through my content without always telling people to buy, buy, buy.
Mhm.
And I have used that tactic, and even though I paid her greatly and landed no PR deals, the messaging framework that she taught me when I worked with her actually has more than paid itself off. However, I did find a man on Threads that is he feels very like genuine, like how I feel towards, with myself and
Mm.
providing value. And he has a messaging membership
Mm.
and I want to join it. And that's going to be a new goal for mine for 2024. Because I know when you were here and we were talking about you had worked with your messaging coach and how, all of that, I just feel like that's going to help me not only with my repetition and repeating the messaging and all of that stuff, but like getting to the root cause of like why people want to hear from me in the first place.
Yeah. Yep. There is a really interesting connection between messaging and repetition
Mhm.
in the sense that when you nail your messaging and you start repeating it over and over again, right?
Mhm.
That's where it's really powerful. And I feel that way about content too.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I teach long form content as your cornerstone or your anchor for your business.
Yeah.
Because when you create long form content and you nail it, which I think, I think I teach people how to nail it by teaching them my pillars and my frameworks inside my program.
Yeah.
Then you go and you repeat those messages everywhere. You repurpose them as social posts, you repurpose them as speaking topics for summits, you repurpose them in your emails, all those things. Your messaging is like, and your messaging and your messages, I should say, because messaging and messages are a little different, is
Mhm.
like cohesive. And it puts you in a position where not only is it easier to repeat those things, but you feel confident that you're repeating the right things.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good point, is that that messaging is kind of like what underlies a good repetition strategy. It's like you don't want to just repeat things that didn't work the first time. You want to repeat things that do work, right? Yeah,
I like
love
that.
that.
Now, when it comes to this on multiple platforms, so one of my strategies for 2023, 22 into 23, and I think has really, I think it worked and I just fell off. So I started creating TikTok videos on TikTok because I like their filming and editing features. And I would repurpose those videos. A week later would be my strategy. So they would go live this week on TikTok, and then next week it would go live on other platforms. So from platform to platform, Jana, some people's audiences might end up being different. What say you about repurposing content and messaging, like when it comes to different platforms?
Yeah, I think my philosophy on this comes back to who I work with, because I work with a lot of coaches and service providers, people
Yeah.
who their full-time job is not creating content. Their full-time job is working with clients. And I think, it's interesting because on the other hand, my signature offer is a course. And
Yeah.
although I do provide some support inside the Facebook group, I don't have, when I look at my calendar for the week, my calendar isn't time blocked across the board with one-to-one clients.
Yeah.
My calendar is time blocked with things that have to do with creating content, that bring people into my ecosystem, right? But most of my clients are people who do wake up in the morning on a Monday morning and look at their calendar for the week, or they're reviewing it on Sunday night and they're seeing clients on their calendar, or that's what they desire. They're trying to fill out their calendar, with mostly client work, right?
Yeah.
And so I think about this whole multi-channel marketing thing in a way that, like, I think you need to actually figure out a way to be able to multi-channel market, meaning, and what I mean by that is like being on multiple platforms, like what you're describing, taking your TikToks, putting them on Instagram, putting them on YouTube Shorts, etc. If you're going to do that and try to do multi-channels, you need to figure out a way, if you are a coach or a service provider who only has a few hours a week, maybe, to create content in a way that is going to work.
Yeah.
So my answer to that is kind of like, well, if it turns out that you have more than one audience, and that's always going to like add a layer of complexity to your business,
Mhm.
then, or different audiences on different platforms, like I actually think we do need to figure out how to simplify things. But
Yeah.
my answer might be different than the answer I would give to you, Heather, as a friend of yours, or to someone who does have more time on their schedule to create content. And it's different than the answer that I might give myself if I'm asking myself in self-coaching, because I do have more time on my calendar to create content. And in that case, I would say, okay, yeah, you're right. Like, you could have different audiences on different platforms. So let's break that down and figure out how to adjust your repetition of your content strategy to address each one of those audiences, if that makes sense. So that would be like my high level answer, I guess.
Yeah. So one of the questions I get, not all the time, but sometimes is, um, should I be changing that content per platform? Because a lot of
Right.
people feel like, well, if I put it from platform to platform, then Instagram has a copyright on music. Can I really put that on Pinterest? And my short answer is always just to mute the audio for Pinterest. For
Yep.
other platforms, chances are that that music is already copyrighted in those places anyway, so you're going to be safe.
Yep.
But that's not always true for YouTube, though,
Yeah.
because YouTube just opened up a new avenue for shorts creators to share revenue. So that one might be slightly different. Um, and then that
Yep.
always brings like a level of complexity in their minds of, oh no, I'm going to have to film this and edit it for each individual platform.
Right. And you just introduced another level of complexity that some creators um, go for and some don't, which is multiple streams of revenue. And you're in your business, you're advanced enough at this point where the monetization on YouTube is enough that it adds to your multiple streams of revenue, and you have the ability to manage that. You have a small but mighty team to help you with things. You have workflows in place, all those kinds of things, and you yourself do have more time than a couple hours a week to create content.
Mhm.
You've set it up that way. So for you, that makes sense. But I see a lot of coaches and service providers, especially when they're first getting started, they think they have to serve all those masters and monetize,
Yeah.
in all those different ways. So that again is that level of complexity. So I think that it's about determining which levels of complexity you want to introduce into your business and which ones you want to either not introduce or be aware that you've created and be like, oh, no, 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 I got to remove that level of complexity and not worry about that. So that's another one. But I do believe in adjusting your content a little bit for each platform. And you brought up a really good example of that, which is what was the one you just brought up?
Um, Copyrighted
Sorry.
platforms to Pinterest.
Right, exactly, right. Another one is like you might take the same caption from an Instagram post
Mhm.
and put it on your threads 2 weeks later or a month
Yeah.
later or even 3 days later, whatever you want to do. And if you do that, you might grab that caption, but instead of saying go to my link in bio, you could just actually add the link because Threads
Yeah.
allows links. So I do think it's good to adjust those things a little bit, which is also why for, again, coaches and service providers, my people who have those time blocks on their schedule for all the clients who only have a few hours a week to create content, I think it's important to just choose, a couple of platforms and not try to go crazy and do like the multi-channel marketing thing, at least in the beginning
Yeah.
when they're solopreneurs.
And
So we kind of went down a weird path here, but go ahead, sorry.
I think if you are a coach or a service provider and you are creating really high value Instagram reels and you did want to repurpose those to multiple platforms, but you are concerned about the music aspect, which a lot of people have been over the years concerned about that, rightly so. Pinterest
Mhm.
is muting audios that are copyrighted.
Yep.
But with that being said, you could take the path of possibly slower growth, which would be more sustainable in the long run if your audios are not getting muted, and just not use audio. Just have face to camera with you talking
Yep.
to the camera, and then you could even turn that around and repurpose the script for that video into a thread or into a blog post or into an email.
Yep. And I think one approach that can work, you mentioned slow growth for people who have fewer hours on their schedule every week for content creation, is if you want to take a multi-channel approach like that, just realize that you're probably not going to be able to do that with 4 or 5 reels a week,
Yeah,
right?
no.
Maybe you just create one really good reel per week, or in
Mhm.
this case, you're talking about TikTok, and use that to repurpose, to create all the other content for that week or the following week or something like that. So
Yeah.
it's like you could go deep or you could go wide, but you can't really do both if you only have a few hours a week for content.
Yeah. And we really want to think about sustainability here and
Mhm.
having quality going out over quantity.
Yep.
And one of the things that I'm seeing a lot on threads talked about at the end of the year were people evaluating the reels and TikTok videos that actually did the best for them. And
Mhm.
these, what they're calling the 6 or 7 second wonders
Yeah.
with the, read the caption kind of thing, didn't really do well for anybody. A
Yep.
lot of people got views, but very few of them got engagement and very few of them resulted in comments or DMs or anything like that. So also just considering what you want your strategy long term to be. And like you said, having one really good reel that's maybe a minute to 90 seconds
Yep.
that you then repurpose. Like I mentioned, the script for the video into some threads, maybe an email, and then you like really expand on that thought and go deeper on it or wider on it.
Yep.
That would be a really good way for not only repurposing, but if you did go wide, then you could go deeper or vice versa.
Yeah, that makes sense. And another big trend that we're hearing a lot about for 2024, it's like seems like everybody who's saying like, here's what I predict for 2024 is talking about this is long form content. And bringing back to the topic at hand, which is repeating yourself.
And repurposing.
Um, yeah, like that's to me, that's the big flex. And that's really what I'm teaching inside high leverage content. And what I really believe is when I say the flex, I mean like for those people who are listening who are like, what is that? Like that's like a millennial thing, right? Or something. But the idea that like that gives you the biggest leverage, which is why I call it high leverage content. Creating a long form piece of content, maybe once a month, maybe once every other month, even. And knowing that you're going to be able to use that content over and over and over and over again, not just taking it once and breaking it down into micro content and then forgetting about it, but actually coming back to it, 4 months later and doing it all again. And either using that same micro content or creating new micro content from the same piece of long form content.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm really teaching, listen, like create your piece of long form content. Right now, a lot of people are relying on blogging, which I think is great, but podcasts, YouTube videos that are long form can also be your source content like this. And knowing that if you create a suite of high leverage content is what I call it, but I just mean long form content that's going to give you a lot of leverage. Um, and say you end up with, 10 posts, let's say that's your first goal, you're going to be able to at some point like stop creating content. Like you don't have to keep doing it over and over again if you've created it in a strategic way, because you
Yeah.
can just go back to the beginning and start reusing it again. And I know a lot of people are really resonating with that message right now, which is that like, yeah, put the time in now to create great quality strategic long form content that you'll
Mhm.
be able to repurpose over and over again. So if you want to think about it in the context of our conversation today, do that, and then you can repeat those messages that you worked hard on. And it sort of brings us back to that idea that if you're strategic about your messages to begin with, and then you repeat the ones that you chose strategically that works for you, that convert, like that's the real, again, that's the real flex, right? So I think that's the
So
other thing too, is long form content helps you be able to repeat your messages more. So go ahead, sorry.
I have a really terrible example here. So
Great.
this is what I like to call the wagon wheel strategy, right? And what you're saying with the long form content, remember this wheel is always moving. It's like a tire.
Uh-huh.
Some people call it tire and spoke, some people call it wagon wheel, it doesn't really matter. Anyways, the long form content is the piece that surrounds all of the micro content that you make. So what I do actually on this YouTube channel every single year, and just Tuesday, I publish the long form piece of content that's going to end up feeding all of these spokes. And then vice versa, these spokes are going to feed that long piece of content for the entire year.
Mm.
And that piece of content is going to consistently bring me new leads and new students to the membership and potentially new clients to the agency as well. Although that's less my focus as it is filling the membership, right?
Yep.
This is how you can think about it from the perspective of like one piece of long form content. These spokes could be repurposing to platforms like what we're talking about today, or these spokes could be creating additional little pieces of content that break off the big one.
That makes sense. I like it. And I like the visual too. And you've mentioned that to me before. And this time it's not that I did understand it before too, but this time the extra visual that you gave about the fact that it's always moving
Mhm.
helped me understand it too, because if you think about it, like it's always moving and it's doing a 360-degree rotation and you'll get back to the beginning again, right? And you can kind of
Yeah.
start again, right? And like by rotating and getting back to that 360 each time, like you're moving forward, you're right, you're like moving the cart forward. So or the wagon. So
Yeah.
I like that visual a lot, and that extra little piece of it is really good too. So makes
Yeah.
sense.
This is what I do every year, and I've been doing this for 3 years, and I really think it has helped me to become successful in my content creation. And it's something I'm consistently doing and perfecting in my business, but it also helps me to show up and use the messaging that I'm using and the same, like teaching on these topics. So my audience is always hearing the same things from me that they need to hear in order to ultimately get to the point where they buy.
Right. Right.
So I think if you're struggling with what content to create, then your one long form piece of content that you make on whatever topics. For me, and it's always this, it's Pinterest marketing strategy, what I would tell my friends
Mhm.
for that year. So this year's Pinterest marketing strategy for 2024, what I would tell my friends. And I'm very open in this video every year. And then that video, because I talk about so many different things, ends up becoming individual blog posts. I already created all the content, so I just have to update those every year.
Mhm.
And because of this platform, and because it is always moving forward and always changing and adjusting, that gives me new content to create and update, but it also helps me to hone my messages and repeat them.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So getting back to the idea of repetition, one thing as you're describing this concept and this that you use and describing why it's so powerful for you, one thing that we haven't mentioned in terms of repeating your content over and over is that if you don't repeat your main messages and your content, it's hard for people to remember you in that time at that time that they do have the need. And
Yeah.
that could be like all of a sudden one day they decide, you know what? I've been hearing from Heather and other experts as well, and other just, people who are my peers, for example, that Pinterest is a great place to market, but I've never, grabbed the bull by the horns and started, and I'm ready to start. So who are they going to think of when they're ready to start? Maybe they weren't ready the first, 16 times that they heard your message. But
Mhm.
the idea here is that you're staying top of mind.
Yeah.
Um, Now, I will say, as a caveat, sometimes I hear people say that that's the main reason you should repeat your message over and over again so that you stay top of mind. I actually think it's a nice byproduct and it helps a lot, but it's not the only thing. Um, so we want to be top of mind for the thing that we help people with.
Mhm.
Um, but again, it comes back to the quality of the content too, I guess is what I mean by that. So, but that's one big benefit of repeating your messages. And if you get in your own head and you're thinking people are going to get bored when you repeat your message, you're really shooting yourself in the foot. You're doing yourself and those people a disservice, because you're not, well, for many reasons, but the one I'm mentioning right now is you're not really solidifying yourself in the mind of that person as the go-to expert on that topic. Whereas if you do repeat yourself, you solidify yourself, stay top of mind as the go-to expert on that topic. That's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say.
I like that. And I
Yeah.
agree. I like that and I agree. So really repurposing can come in your messaging, utilizing the same messaging over and over, or it can come from just repeating content from platform to platform. It really just depends
Yep.
on. I think everyone should probably start with figuring out their messaging and then repeating it across the
Yep.
platforms. So we first start with the messaging and repeating it, and then we add in the platforms. But
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
knowing that you don't need to be on all the platforms in order to succeed. Um, I don't have that many Instagram followers. I don't really get clients and sales from there. I don't really have that many TikTok followers. I don't really get clients and sales from there. What does really well for me are my SEO platforms. And that's really where I focus my time and energy and my efforts.
Yep.
Last year, we really focused in on the YouTube channel and the blog
Yep.
and really taking the content and the blog posts to the next level. And I can see the results from that. Now, this year, I really just want to
Nice.
work on email marketing and growing my email list,
Yep.
which my email list crossed 6,000 people before the end of the year. And this
Awesome.
YouTube channel crossed 10,000 subscribers, which is mind blowing on January 1st. Both of those things come from my dedication to content last year.
Yes.
So
Yep.
that's what I'm taking into this year is really the messaging and the email marketing strategies are going to be what's going on, underneath it all.
Yep.
And it's really just continuing the same content strategy and
Yep.
up leveling that.
Yeah. I just want to say that like louder for the people in the back. Basically, what you're saying is that all the other things that you're able to do for visibility, they all roll out from your long form content. Your long form content is like makes everything else possible, essentially, is what you're saying, right? And
100%.
I want to go back to something that I said earlier and what you just said about how your messaging is different than your messages.
Mhm.
And the reason I said that is because messaging, I feel like, is something that we hear about as online entrepreneurs or as marketers or as people who need to be able to do some marketing to market what we do. You hear about messaging experts, right? And messaging coaches. And like I worked with a messaging coach this year. And for me, when you do that, you're really taking the time to think through and tease out and articulate, find the words to articulate your top level messages. You know,
Mhm.
it's almost like the non-visual side of your brand is really what messaging is.
Yeah.
And that is very valuable work. But when I say repeating your messaging, I don't just mean that. I mean repeating your messages.
Mhm.
And your messages are more than just your top level messaging. And your messaging should be, you know, in like woven in through your messages. But to me, the messages are a lot of those seminal pieces of long form content that we create as well.
Yeah.
So again, the way I just define it is like all the things that your audience needs in aggregate to hear and understand more deeply and learn in order to feel like they're ready to buy from you.
Mhm.
Those are your messages, and they're not the same as your messaging. So when you say that you should ideally figure out all your messaging first and then repeat it, I agree with that to the point. I agree that you should figure out your messages first. I think you should articulate
Yeah.
your messages and then repeat them. But I want to just say, I don't necessarily think that you need to perfect your messaging
Mhm.
before you start doing that because, and this is
No,
getting a
I
little
agree.
nerdy. Yeah, this is getting a little nerdy, but I think because a lot of times when we write our content or record our content, right? If you're doing a podcast or a YouTube channel as your long form content, that's where you actually get clear on your messaging through the process of actually publishing content.
Yeah.
So anyway, just a
No,
little bit of a ramble there, but yeah.
I would definitely agree. I don't think messaging comes first because, and tell me if you disagree, I think messaging actually comes from the act of working with people and
Yeah.
understanding what they need at their root,
Yep.
then delivering on that. I had no idea really what my messaging was. And it's not that like I want to work with a messaging person this year. It's not that I necessarily need to do that, but I really want to grow the membership side of my business. So in order to do that, I need to be more consistent in my messaging and my messages and my copywriting.
Yep.
And I want to work with someone to fast track that. So instead of figuring that out on my own this
Yep.
year and possibly investing in more books and podcasts and whatever else,
Yep.
I want to fast track it with someone who already knows that thing.
Yeah.
But I've spent years figuring that out already, and I already know what makes people tick,
Yeah.
what makes people want to buy. But sometimes I need to get out of my own head. And to do that, working with someone else is going to help me
Yeah.
just pull me out of
Yeah.
the noise.
Yeah, totally. And you know who I think you should work with, but I love Samantha Hoylett. She's my messaging coach and she's amazing. And shout out to Samantha. That's who I would
Yeah.
recommend. But I know you have people that you like to learn from as well. So yeah. All right. What else? I'm trying to think. I feel like, you know, overall we came out of the gate in this video saying like, no, 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 your audience isn't going to get bored. Like they're not, you know,
They're really not.
the right people, the people who are your people who really connect with you, who like your messages and your messaging, the
Mhm.
ones who are eventually going to buy from you, like they're not going to get bored when you repeat your messages. And
Mhm.
there are so many benefits to doing it that you have to get out of your own head about it. You got to figure out how to do that and make sure that you are repeating your messages all
Yeah.
the time. So I think that was kind of like the big takeaway of this video, I would say.
Yeah. And I think we also just differentiated the way that we talk about repurposing content. And I think it was a much better conversation, because when most people think about repurposing, they literally think about filming on TikTok, putting it on Instagram, putting it on YouTube, like
Yep.
that process, but really it can be so much more, and it is so much more.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like today, I think we talked about it more at the high level strategy level, whereas what you're talking about is kind of the tactics of
Tactic.
taking a TikTok and putting it on Instagram in a way that works.
Yeah.
But the high level is like the why, the how, yeah, things like that. And that's kind of more what we talked about today. It would be fun to have a conversation about like different buckets of repurposing too, because I've never really sat down and done it, but I know I've kind of riffed on it before. It's like repurposing can mean a lot of different things, and they all begin with R. It's like you could reuse, right? You could repost, you could reimagine, you could recycle or upcycle sometimes. Like there's different ways that you can actually like, you know, repurpose and repeat. There's different ways to repeat your messages. So maybe a cool nerdy conversation for another nerdy day.
Yeah. Well, next time we are talking about, if I can get to the right place.
What are we doing next week? I don't remember off the top of my head. I always should
Me
check
neither.
before we start these videos.
That's fine. I'm gonna check it out.
Oopsies.
On 11/9, we're talking about 3 content ideas to sell your digital products. Are we talking?
Cool.
We talk about that yet?
Oh yeah, that was 11/9. Sorry, we're looking at January now. Not
Oh,
one. Yeah, so
11. 1.
1/11.
1/11. What digital products should you sell as a service provider?
Ooh, that'll be really good.
That's a
So
good
it's
one.
for service providers who now want to have digital products. That's what we're going to talk about, what they should think about selling.
Yeah. And for
Ah,
anyone that
love
is
it.
accustomed to watching these YouTube lives live with us on Thursdays or catching them on Thursday as the replay, we want to let you know that starting on the 17th of January, we're actually going to be moving to Wednesdays because it's better for both of our schedules. Thursdays is just a bit of a crunch to get to be here and to provide this kind of content for you. So we want to make sure we are our best selves. So we're moving to Wednesdays at 1 Eastern Standard Time.
Oh, goodness gracious. It's so hard to remember until it's time. 12 o'clock Eastern time.
12 Eastern, but after the time change, it'll be 12 Eastern or still 1.
After the time change, it'll still be 12 Eastern. We're going to keep it at
Perfect.
12 Eastern all the time, right?
Beautiful.
So
Yes.
it'll change for you, but it won't change for anyone who is tuning in from a place that's not Arizona.
Perfect.
Are there other states that don't change the time?
Hawaii.
Oh, interesting.
Hawaii
Okay.
and Puerto Rico.
Okay. All right.
And maybe America Samoa.
I wish the rest of us would get on board and not change the time. I'll bet you wish that
Guys,
too.
your senators can't decide which time to choose. That's why it hasn't happened, because the bill has been introduced before Congress like half a dozen times. But it always dies in committee because no one can decide what time to choose, standard or daylight. So write your senators
And we don't even care. We just want to pick one.
and your House of Representatives. Do the hard work for your constituents.
Oh, I was looking away and then I came back and now I don't see your Grinch plant.
Oh, it's been gone this whole live. It's right
Oh,
here.
okay.
It died. I didn't water it enough, so it died.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Well, we're off topic. Sorry. I dragged
That's
us off
all right.
topic.
Well, I'll see you right back here, same time next week. And then after that, we're changing to Wednesdays.
Yep.
So we'll see all of you next week at 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time.
Noon Eastern time. That doesn't, so it's, oh, you mean next week? Sorry. Yeah, next week. Next week, 1 o'clock Eastern time. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Well, bye for now.
Bye.
And we're out. Cool.